decide who wins the title and who takes home the $500,000 first place prize. Andy, he tied it up. Was it the cards again, or did you get outplayed?
Well, you know, it's hard to tell without seeing the cards. There were a couple of pretty interesting hands in there. I think the one I flopped top pair, and he had a straight draw on that hand, and you know, and then there's a couple of big all-ins, and I think we both played those big all-ins right.
Okay, Chris, one win away from getting that monkey off your back. How bad do you want it?
I would love to win this tournament. I would love to win this tournament.
All right, well,
I'll work hard for that.
I'll let you two get at it. Dealer, let's get the cards in the air. Good luck, guys.
All right, Leanne, thanks. We're back to square one. Each player has taken one match in this best 2 out of 3, so this is effectively winner take all. Blinds go back to 3 and 6,000, and again, players start with 640,000 in chips. And courtesy of the Vonage heads-up pocket cam, 10-9 for Ferguson.
Yeah, Chris made an adjustment heading into match 2, whereby he check-raised on the flop a lot more. Now it's up to Andy Block to pay attention to that and start checking flops behind Chris a lot more.
And the flop, Trey 6 Queen, a flush draw for Andy.
Nothing happening for Chris Ferguson other than position.
Chris uses that position, bets 20,000. And Andy calls.
Andy could have check-raised with the draw here, playing the first hand a bit cautiously.
And Andy makes his flush on the turn.
Not just any flush, he's got the nut flush.
Andy checks, Chris checks. And the river and 8 of hearts.
Andy is not going to try to set a trap. He's going to bet right out in the hopes he can get called. Not going to happen with 10 high, though, as Chris folds and sends the pot over to Andy.
Well, Andy Block off to a good start as we take a look back at match 2. Chris was on the verge of another loss at the final table, but a queen on the flop kept him in business. Pocket jacks were also good for Chris.
All in.
I call.
And when he had a chance to put Andy away, he did. Making quads and knotting the final table at 1 win apiece.
Well, the same way, Matt, that the deck didn't cooperate with Chris in match number 1, it did in match number 2. And now here we are, just like you say, winner take all.
And then you can have a first, second, third, and fourth place.
King 5 for Ferguson.
With the same number of matches, actually.
Puts in a raise to 15,000. Blind still at 3 and 6. Suited Jack 4 for Andy. And he calls. Flop 9 Queen 7.
Neither player with a pair. And neither player with the desire to bet, apparently.
There's your pair as the turn brings a 5 of clubs.
See if Andy's going to try to pick this pot up.
Andy bets 15,000.
Well, he's got Jack high and a lust for the 30K out in the middle. Chris is going to call the bet with his 5s.
Rivers and 8 of spades.
That puts 4 cards to a straight out there, as well as 4 cards bigger than Chris's 5.
Andy bets 30,000.
Andy's going to bluff at this pot one more time with 4 to a straight.
And this time it worked. Chris folds the better hand, and Andy takes down the pot.
Yeah, tough to call with a pair of 5s in Chris's spot on that board. That's something we didn't see a lot of out of Andy thus far in the first 2 matches. Getting aggressive earns him 30,000 in that pot.
When a best 2 out of 3 goes all the way through, would you rather have won the first one or the second one?
Oh, I got to say the second one every single time because momentum is such a big factor in heads-up play. We can't emphasize it enough. Andy right now is feeling like his back is up against the wall. Having won the first match, he expects that he would have finished things off by now. Chris, on the other hand, having equalized, feeling good about things. And why wouldn't he, right?
Ferguson has just squeezed bullets. Pair of aces for Chris. He raises to 15,000. Suited 5 tray for Andy. Likely not a good enough hand for Chris to suck a lot of chips out of him here. Andy calls. The flop brings a 9-deuce-6.
No hearts out there. The deuce and the 6 give Andy Block a gut shot straight draw.
He checks.
Still not a very good-looking hand for Andy. Doesn't get much better than what Chris has.
Chris bets 20,000. And look at Andy with an aggressive check raise to 60,000.
Yeah, he's taken a page out of Chris's match 2 playbook here, but he's picked a bad time to do it. Now Chris's decision is whether to just call and hope that Andy commits more chips to the pot on the turn, or put in the re-raise, hoping that Andy's got some kind of draw.
He has chosen the re-raise to 175,000. And no chance Andy can feel good enough about his suited 5 tray to make that call. However, Chris got more action with his aces than we thought, and he moves into the lead. Our championship match is knotted up at 1, leaving Andy Block and Chris Ferguson with no room for error. Both players are talented, but both can't leave with the title. One of them will leave Caesar's Palace a champion. The other will circle next year's tournament on the calendar. Welcome back to Caesar's Palace on the Las Vegas Strip. Action continues at our final table between Andy Block and Chris Ferguson. Blinds have moved up to 5 and 10,000. Suited ace-6 for Chris. He puts in a raise to 25,000. King-7 for Andy. And Andy makes the call. Each player has one win in this best 2 out of 3. The flop 10-9 deuce, a club draw for Chris.
Not a lot happening for Andy Block as he checks over to Chris.
Chris bets out 35,000. Andy folds his hand and Chris adds to his lead.
Some players can get tempted to check a big draw like that, hoping that it comes in and their opponent will lead out at them. To me, that's a big mistake, though. Rather fire a barrel in position on the flop and win it right there without having to make the hand.
King-8 for Andy. He raises to 25,000.
Andy Block raises on the button. Chris makes the call.
Chris has called with a suited hand, and another flush draw for Chris, 7-10-9.
Straight draw for Andy Block.
Chris checks.
Check, check. And as we see a turn card this time, Chris makes his flush.
Andy has made a pair of 8s, but there are 3 diamonds and 4 cards to a straight out there.
Chris bets 35,000. Scary board, and Andy folds his hand.
Stop running over me, Chris.
Yeah, pretty easy laydown for Andy Block.
I had the king-high flush. I had king-high flush.
Had king eye flush? Ooh. I was in bad shape.
You're one of the only people who believe me when I tell them that.
Why not?
You know it. I know. Well,
I'm glad I'm glad that the turn wasn't like a jack of diamonds or something.
Blind still at 5 and 10,000.
Or the 6 of diamonds. I had the open-ended straight draw and it paired me.
Oh, I see. If you bet the flop, you've been in trouble. 5 and 10 here.
Yeah. I could have trapped myself, though, if I made the straight.
Pair of jacks for Chris.
Boy, and the deck is really hitting him hard in the last couple of matches.
Suited 10-4 for Andy. And Andy makes the call.
Chris with a small lead in this final match.
And the flop. Flop brings Andy top pair and a flush draw.
Check.
You can count on action in this pot.
Andy checks.